Welcome. So now we're hoping to start chapter 5 of the book of Ezra. And when we do so, possibly we could also cover chapter 6 today. But just to be aware, we're in the middle of the two chapters of the book of Ezra that are in Aramaic. Especially when we read Aramaic, like in the book of Daniel and a couple chapters here. So I think it's a really big service when we're trying to pronounce the Aramaic words for people to read along with. It is, at least personally, I found it is much more difficult to try to pronounce the words correctly, and it's not as intuitive. Like if a person has already learned how to pray in Hebrew, so then the Hebrew words are easy to read, even if you never saw that verse in a year or two, whatever it is. But with the Aramaic, even having just read it recently, it could still be potentially a tongue twister for people not familiar with the language. It's not precisely the same Aramaic one would get from a Gemara, so it's its own category, and especially if you want to learn this kind of Aramaic, it's good to learn it here in the book of Daniel or in the book of Ezra. Okay, so now here we're in Ezra chapter 5, verse 1. Visnab Visnabi Chagai Neviah Zachariah Bar Ido Neviah Al Yehudaye Divi Hud Virshalem Bashum Elah Yisrael Alehon Beidayin Kamu Zerubbabel Bar Shal Altiel Vishua Bar Yotzadak Bashariv Lemivnei Base Elaha Di Virshalem Vimhon Neviaya Di Elaha Musa'adin Lahon. Okay, please translate the first two verses. Mark.
Okay, mic is on now. Haggai the prophet and Zechariah, son of Edo, the prophets prophesied to the Jews who were in Judah and in Jerusalem in the name of the God of Israel about them. The Zu is Zerubbabel, I guess that's
Yeah, Zerubbabel.
okay, son of Shil, Shilte, Shitel,
Shealtiel.
Shatiel, and Joshua, son of Gilead, arose and began to build the temple of God that was in Jerusalem. And with them were the prophets of God assisting them.
Okay, so let's now whenever you have nowadays, whenever you have you read a verse that says the name Jeshua, it's good to give it a little extra treatment because it's often misquoted. I actually met like a missionary recently who conflated the word Jeshua here as referring to a failed Messiah from a different religion. Uh, and here it says the priest. Okay, so let's look at the commentary on verse 2. So who is taking the commentary? Teresa, are you doing that, or Russell, or
Yeah.
Linda? Who's
I
got it?
don't know. I'm not clear about who's doing what.
Linda.
All right. Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel,
Altia. Mhm.
Shealtiel, and Jeshua, son of Zoadak, arose. Immediately upon hearing the prophecy, Zerubbabel and Yeshua arose. Are Yeshaya, Mitrani,
That's
see
Rabbi Yeshaya
commentary.
Mitrani from the city of Trani.
Okay, see commentary to 2:2. Haggai 1:12 through 14 relates that Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, and Joshua, son of Jehozadak, the Kohen Gadol, and the entire remnant of the people listened to the voice of Hashem their God and the words of Haggai the prophet, and they came and did the work on the temple of Hashem.
Okay, so we're seeing a different name of Jeshua, or in the Hebrew, Yeshua. So what can you read that again in the commentary? What's his alternate name? As in we see in the book of Haggai?
Are you reading Haggai relates that Jerubbaal, son of
Yes.
Shealtiel, and
Or you could open
Yahshua?
the book of Haggai and look there.
Okay, and Yahshua, son of Jehozadak, the Kohen
Are you reading?
Gadol. I don't know. And the entire remnant of the people
No, no,
listen
yeah,
to
okay.
the
So you see, it's this is a potential tongue twister, but look at it says Joshua, not Jeshua. Joshua, not Jeshua,
Joshua.
with an O.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's look in Haggai to confirm this.
Haggai 1:12 through 14 relates
Yeah.
that,
Right. So look in Haggai 12, chapter 1, verse 12, and
well,
and
they
also
call it
and
the Torah then, right?
yeah, it's and so Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, and Joshua, son of Yotzadak, the Kohen Gadol. And the entire remnant of people listened to the voice of Hashem their God and the words of Haggai the prophet. When what
So I
Hashem their
need to
God had sent
turn
them to
in my
prophecy, and the
Torah
people
to
feared to.
Haggai.
Okay, uh, this is important. Jeshua, the only famous Yeshua mentioned in the Tanakh is his other name is Joshua. From here, we're not sure which is his actual name or which is his like favorite nickname. But his name is also called Joshua in the book of Haggai.
So the book of Haggai.
Yeah, so Artsel's quoting it exactly right. But so this is important. So if somebody is confused and tries to just extrapolate and yeah, Russell, you know all about this. People trying to find the name of Jesus everywhere, right? So,
Uh-huh.
so the only one mentioned, the most famous Jesus mentioned in the Bible, his name is Joshua, and we see in the book of Haggai.
And Haggai
Joshua is
1:12
just
through 14.
a variation of Joshua,
Yes,
but I think
Joshua.
it's an important thing. So the most famous Yeshua in Tanakh, that may not even be his name. So I mean, it's like a double. It's like a double embarrassing situation when somebody thinks that they're reading about Jesus. when either way, it's saying that the high priest, not the Davidic governor of Israel. Remember the three candidates for Mashiach in that generation: Daniel, Zerubbabel, and Nehemiah.
Right.
Joshua was the priest. In fact, we saw last week that Joshua was the nephew of Ezra. Okay, so the tribe of Levi.
It wouldn't by any chance be two separate people, would it?
Well, I mean, just compare it's Joshua the son of Yehozadak the Kohen Gadol, who was with Zerubbabel. Just read what it says in Haggai. He was with Zerubbabel, and they did the work of the temple. And here, he's with Zerubbabel, and he does the work of the temple. You see? Now, if somehow there would be two different people, they still wouldn't be somebody uh, who was a false messiah 500 years later,
No,
right?
they have different fathers' names, or is that just the spelling of them?
right? So
Yehozadak and Yazadek.
Yeah, because
right,
Haggai pronounces it Joshua and Ezra pronounces it Yeshua.
and his father's name
Is
Yehozedek
the
or
same name.
Yozedek, right? It's the
Yeah,
same. Because I mean,
father's name is the
when you
same.
say the high priest, how many high priests were there in the time of Zerubbabel and Ezra in Israel? There was one.
Well, only one.
Right. Right. So this is a clear situation where there is a slight variation in both of the names, his name and his father's name, but it's clearly the same person. Just looking at scripture itself without any commentary telling you this.
Well, it's interesting that Joshua, they changed the vowels. That's interesting.
But
And
his father's name has an H,
Jehozadak
right?
had,
Hey,
that was thinking, yeah, that he would added the holy H, a holy hay added to his name.
right, right, exactly. We see this is Midrashim about somebody like, for example, uh, Hoshea ben Nun became Yehoshua. He had an extra letter added to his name because of his rise in prominence, and Moses was praying for him to be saved from the council of the spies. So, uh, yeah, we see that the slight variation in the name is common in Tanakh, but it's just important to know this. I mean, I never expected somebody to try to claim that this Joshua was a later failed Messiah. It doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. But
No,
somebody did. So now that we know that there's people who are just not reading, even I thought if a person doesn't read a context of a chapter, so they can misunderstand a verse. Here, they're not reading the next word in the same verse. It's just amazing, and so it's good to be able to defend the Torah against a potential person who doesn't understand it and would respect it if he understood the true answer, or potentially against a heretic who's trying to trying to uh, you know create disbelief against the true word of God and try to substitute it with a human version. So so it's good for people to be aware of this. So just do a comparative study between these verses. And Rabbi Tovia Singer teaches that it's good to quote just from Tanakh quoting um, without quoting too much into the oral Torah when you're dealing with a missionary, because the actual verses is something they already know or have access to. Yeah. So let's continue in the chapter. But if you're a person who's trying to learn the Hebrew of the Tanakh, you can see what I mean here by the Aramaic. It's a bit harder to get used to. But again, one of the wonderful things is since Gemara is in Aramaic, a person can study Gemara, a person can study Targum translation on Tanakh, and pick up a lot of these Aramaic words, and just even if you don't yet know what the words mean, you know how to pronounce them. I mean, some of these I found very difficult the first time I was reading this to even pronounce. But thank God, Baruch Hashem. It's good to review, and I'm finding it easier to pronounce it now than the first time I went over this. But I'm mindful of it was like a struggle for me the first time I was reading this in the original language, and that's why I'm trying to take extra effort to pronounce it correctly, and so you too can learn how to pronounce it yourself. Okay, verse 3 in the Aramaic. This is Ezra chapter 5. Bezim na asa alehon tatnai pachas avar nahara ushasar boznai uchenavas hon v'chein amrin lahom man sam lachom te'em baisa dina libnei v'ush sharna dina shach lala Adain kanema amarna lahom man inun shemahas guvraya di dina vinyana banayin Ve'ein elahahom havas al savei Yehudaye v'la vatilu himo ad tama l'daryavesh yahach ve'edayin yesivun nishtavana aldana. Okay, please translate through verse 4. Through verse 5, excuse me. That's 3, 4, and 5, Mark.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Mhm.
At this time, okay. At this time, Tenai, governor of the Trans-Euphrates region, approached them along with the Shida Banzani. I hope I said that right. Banzani and their accomplices. They said this to them: "Who issued you a decree to construct this building and to lay the foundation for these ramparts?" They then said the following to them: "What are the names of the persons constructing this building?" But the eye of their God watched over the elders of the Jewish and the Tantanite and his accomplices, did not halt them until the matter could be brought before Darius, when Darius and his official would write a reply about it.
Yes. So remember there was this movement we've covered so far in the book of Ezra, a movement to frustrate the rebuilding of the temple. And the scribe for them was Shimshai, already mentioned in this book, who was a surviving son of Haman, causing trouble in his father's memory. But here now they're starting to have God's help. What's the difference now between the trouble they faced 18 years earlier in the book? The difference is now they've reached the 70th year of Jeremiah's prophecy that for 70 years they would be in exile before returning from the exile of Babylon. So now the exile has been fulfilled, so they could return to the Holy Land and they could build the temple. So that's the big difference. Okay, so now the the idea of bringing it before Darius for confirmation what should be done was actually brilliant, because who did they have as advisors to Darius? They had the Queen Mother Esther and the Prime Minister Mordecai. The two prophets of God were advising Darius. So the moment that they got them to agree to wait for confirmation from the king is a turning point in favor of the Jewish efforts to have a second temple era. Okay, let's continue in the verses. Parshegan igarta di shalach tatnai pachas avar nahara shasar boznai uchanavase afar chaye di ba'avar nahara al daryavesh malka kiskama shalahu alohi v'chidna yisiv v'gavei l'daryavesh malka shalama chola. Okay, please translate verses 6 and 7. Mark.
This is the text which Tattenai, governor of the Trans-Euphrates region, along with Shether, Benazai, and his cohorts, the Aphraites, Aphr- Aphraites, who were in the Trans-Euphrates region, sent to King Darius. They sent a message to him, and this was written therein. You want me to keep going?
Yeah, the verse, you didn't finish the verse. The peace is
Okay.
the last word of the verse. Yeah.
Okay.
It's in
Okay.
the English. It's a different paragraph, so I understand why you didn't finish.
Okay. Okay. To Darius, all peace.
Okay,
Let
now you can
it.
pause. Now you can pause.
Okay.
Okay, all right, so let me do more of the Aramaic. Yedia lehave lamalkadi zalna lihud medinta leves elaha rabba vahu mis b'nei evan galal v'ah mit sam v'chuslaya va'vidta dach asparna mis avda umatzlach b'yedhom. Okay, please translate verses just verse 8. Translate verse 8.
Linda.
Oh, let it be known to the king that we have gone to the province of Judah, to the temple of the great God. It is being built of marble stone. Turning the page. With wood reinforcing the walls. This work is proceeding rapidly and is succeeding in their hands.
Okay. Okay, so let's look in the commentary in verse 8.
Okay.
Okay, let's skip to let's see, the third sentence. This is in contrast. Okay, no, sorry, second sentence. The stones were small. Please read from there.
The building stone, compared to those of the first temple, the stones were small and could have been rolled with relative ease. This is in contrast with the massive stones measuring 8 and 10 cubits in length, which were used in the first temple.
So again, this is the restrictions that Cyrus left in his notes giving permission for the building of the temple. Again, it was not according to God's will. God wanted the temple rebuilt, but he decided, well, let's make it like much smaller so it's easier to control. Okay, so let's see.
Did Hashem make it like that?
No, Hashem wanted it rebuilt just like Solomon built it, but Cyrus the Great left a not so great limitation on how big it could be. Okay.
He made it smaller. Why?
Well, let's go down to the comment of Malbim. Malbim suggests,
which is
last line on page 52 in the blue edition of Art School.
Malbim suggests that the wood was mentioned to win favor for the Jews. Wooden walls may be easily destroyed by fire. See the commentary to 6:4. Thus the king was assured that the Jews were not constructing an impregnable fortress.
So, for all of the idea of religious freedom that Cyrus was instituting, he was also by virtue of his will, his written will document that there should be a small temple, and it should have wood reinforcements that could easily be destroyed. So I mean, after the Temple of Solomon was destroyed by fire that burned for a couple days, uh, if the desire was to give a complete reversal of that horrible tragedy, so there would have been absolute freedom to build whatever they wanted to build. For whatever reason, Cyrus had difficulty doing that, and we find that Cyrus never gave up his alternate variations of religion. So he was kind of saying, yeah, the Jews should be able to build something, but he on purpose was trying to limit it. And now Darius was just implementing what Cyrus said. Now the question is this: if Darius is the son of Esther, right, the son of a prophet of God, why wasn't he trying to reverse what Cyrus did? So there's two aspects to this. One is, remember the crazy laws in the ancient Persian Empire, that it was hard to reverse a previous decree. You had to make another decree to overwhelm it, like in the book of Esther. But another aspect of this is that Darius was too young. He was, when they started to build the temple, he was about 3 years old, approximately. So really, it was Mordecai and Esther who were using the royal seal to give permission at first to build the temple. Then, when Darius was old enough, when he took personal control of his kingdom after the age of um, approximately, was it 7, 8, or 9? It shows later in the book. Well, it tells us the year of his reign, so that's implicit there. So when he was old enough, I think it was about 9 years old when he had to next rule about the temple. So at that age, he could give his own opinion, but it was the opinion of a child. So working as his representatives, Mordecai and Esther could not create a new decree that would override the decree of Cyrus. And Darius, when he was old enough to finally take over the reins of the rule, to personally be the ruler of the empire at the tender age of approximately 9 years old. So he wasn't able to calculate all of the meaning behind what Cyrus was not giving to the Jewish people. It's hard for a child to be sensitive to all these variations. Now, the problem is that even if Esther tried to explain it to him, there was like an absolute. Remember how the power that Ahasuerus had, at a whim, anybody was dead. So once somebody got that kind of absolute power, it was hard to influence them in certain ways. They would only go so much in a direction. But the biggest problem was when Darius was old enough to take good advice and decree according to it. It was already too late. They had already finished building the foundations of the temple in his name. So it was just a question, when the temple was completed, it was already built according to the notes of Cyrus. It was too late for Darius to change it when he was old enough. When he was too young, Mordecai and Esther didn't have enough political power to change what Cyrus had said. Therefore, the whatever Cyrus said happened. So therefore, it means that all the good that Cyrus said, he gets the most credit for it than anyone else involved here. And all the mistakes that Cyrus said, he also gets the most credit than anyone else here, because of the virtue of Darius's young age, and the fact that, the circumstance that when it was time to build the temple, it was the surrogates of Mordecai and Esther who were running the kingdom, and they didn't have the power to override whatever Cyrus the Great said. So therefore, all you had was the notes of Cyrus, and that's the complications we're seeing here. That's why all the variations. But this only occurred because of the troublemakers, including Shimshai, the son of Haman. And remember, the Medrash discusses that the 10 sons of Haman who died in the book of Esther, they're the ones most responsible for advocating that the kingdom be hard against the temple. When 18 years earlier, when they were trying to rebuild the temple at that point. So really, these troublemakers, all of them, Haman had a hand in, caused the temple to be built half the size of the Temple of Solomon at first. Later on, of course, the Temple of Herod was eventually bigger than the Temple of Solomon slightly. So this would be later reversed, but for the first 100 years at least, the temple was a consequence. The lesser status of the second temple was a consequence of the evil plot of Haman and his sons, and their successes there. Had they not interfered, and the Jews had been able to build the temple before they had to consult the notes of Cyrus. In other words, when Cyrus was still alive, maybe they wouldn't have even consulted the notes of Cyrus to find the limitation he wrote, right? Maybe they could have built a temple exactly the size of Solomon, and then they would consult it. Oh no, I wanted it to be smaller. Oh, but it's too late already. Okay, just leave it. It's okay if it's bigger. You know what I'm saying? That's probably what would have happened had they been able to build it in the time of Cyrus. But because of basically Haman's family, that's why all this trouble occurred. But again, it was only during the first part of the Second Temple era until the Temple of Herod was built, and that was, as we said, even greater than the Temple of Solomon in some ways. Nevertheless, the things we learned in the Medrash previously still apply. That for example, the Ark of the Covenant was not in the Second Temple, so it was not the same level of holiness either way. Nevertheless, you're trying to build a house to honor God. You want full honor, and so it's not just the evil Haman did in his generation. He and his sons perpetrated a spiritual detriment in the Jewish people that lasted over 100 years. The smaller temple, as it was first built in the days of Ezra and Zerubbabel. Fascinating and sad, but thank God, it wasn't forever. And the temple of Mashiach, the third temple, will be.
If it were
Thank
forever, the Jews would be dead.
No,
That's for sure.
no, yeah, God runs the world. At no time is God's plan in danger. It sometimes could seem like that, but at no time is God's plan in danger. Okay. All right. So we just read through verse 8. Is that correct? No, we did. Did we do 8 or 9? Where are we?
8.
8. Oh. Again, I read, of course, through the chapter before, so it all looks familiar to me. So if I start waxing poetically on a medrash, I may need your help in the future to remember where I just read. Okay, thank you. Edain shelna savaya ilech kinema amarna lahom man sam lahom te'em baisa dana lamivniya v'u sharna dana l'shachlala vav shema has hom she'elna lahom lahoda usach di nichtuv shum guvraya di v'rashehom uchenema hiskama hasidvuna lamemar anachna himo avdohi di Eloha Shemaya var uvanayin Vaisa di hava b'nei mikadmas dana shenin sagian umelach Israel rav benahi v'shachleha. Okay, so let's translate through verse 11, 9, 10, and 11. I guess it's Mark's turn.
Okay. From 8 to 11, correct?
9 to 11.
9 to 11. Then we question these elders, saying thus to them, who issued you a decree to construct this building and to lay the foundation for these ramparts? We asked them for their names in order to inform you so that we could record the names of the men at their head.
One more verse.
This is the answer they replied to us, saying, we are the servants of God of heaven and earth, and we are building a temple that had built these many years ago. A great king of Israel built it and landed its foundation and laid its foundation.
Yes, foundation. Okay, just let's look at the commentary there. I'm sure people can guess which, if you ever read the Book of Kings, you know which king we're talking about, but let's look at the commentary here. Okay, on 11. Okay, the third paragraph, a temple.
A temple that had been built these many years ago. A great king of Israel built it and laid its foundation. The king was Solomon. Rashi, see 1 Kings 5 through 8. Thus, the ancient origin of the temple and the greatness of its founder justify its reconstruction. Malbim.
Okay. So now, Linda, heads up. You're the next translator. Okay, so I'm going to do the
Okay.
Aramaic now.
Okay.
Okay, I'll try to read another 3 verses to get a nice size. Okay, here we go. Verse 12 in the Aramaic. Lahain min di hargizu avaha sana lelaha shemaya yahav himo biyad Nebuchadnezzar melech Bavel kasda'a uvaisa dana sachreha va'ama hagli Bavel Baram bishnas chadal Choresh malka di Bavel Choresh malka sam te'em Beis Elaha dana libneh Rafmanaya di Beis Elaha di Dahava Chaspa di Nebuchadnezzar Hanpek min Hichla di Yerushalem Behevel himo Hichla di Vavel Hanpek himo Koresh Malka min Hichla di Vavel Behivu Leshesh Batzar Shemea di Fecha Sameha. Okay, please translate verses 12, 13, and 14. Linda.
However, because our ancestors had angered the God of heaven, he delivered them into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, the Chaldean, who destroyed this temple and exiled the people to Babylon. However, in the first year of Cyrus, king of Babylonia, King Cyrus gave an order to have this temple of God rebuilt. In addition, the vessels of gold and silver of the temple of God, which Nebuchadnezzar had removed from the sanctuary in Jerusalem and brought to the temple at Babylon, King Cyrus removed them from the temple in Babylon, and they were given to the one named Sheshbazzar, whom he had appointed governor.
Okay, so Sheshbazzar. Okay,
Sheshbazzar.
so now this verse seems to indicate that Sheshbazzar was not Zerubbabel, right? Remember, we already discussed. There was a discussion: who is Sheshbazzar? Could it have been Nehemiah? Could it have been Zerubbabel? But we concluded, according to my opinion, that it is Daniel. So this is implicit. Again, the Sheshbazzar was a governor in the time of Cyrus, in historically, not the current governor, who would be Zerubbabel. You understand?
Yes.
I think it's implicit in the terminology here.
But it says it in 14 in the third paragraph. According to Rashi, Sheshbazzar was another name for Daniel.
Right, but then what's the next part of the commentary say?
According to Rabbi, Ibn Ezra, and Meduzos, he was Zerubbabel.
Right, and we discussed that it was saying it's Mitsudos is possibly contradicted in Judaica,
Right.
Judaica Press, etc. And so if you look at the commentary, we already discussed this in the previous videos.
Right.
So yes, so even though here it mentions Rashi 1 to Rabbi Ibn Ezra Mitsudos 3, that's not the actual calculation. As I mentioned, two separate midrashim agree with Rashi, and there's a different reading of Mitsudos that agrees with Rashi, and etc. And there's other commentary as well. Okay.
I just think it's interesting.
Which part of it? It's
where
all
King Cyrus, where he gave everything to Sheshbazzar, he thinks he's putting them down, but what he's doing is he's cooking his own goose with that stupid letter.
right. But just imagine the troublemakers who protested against God's glory, right? And again, the foundation of them, the advocates back home in Shushan, was the 10 sons of Haman. So
if one could cause this trouble, thank God the other 10 were gone.
Right. So in other words, even though the 10 sons of Haman were not actively trying, perhaps they look forward to having a legal right to hurt Jews. They were not as actively dangerous to the Jews as Haman was. Nevertheless, they were more responsible than Haman for the disrespect and reduction of the size of the temple. So this explains why spiritually they had to go as well. We gave several classes about how the Jews praying in the temple prevents cataclysm in the world.
Right.
So they were endangering the entire world, not just the entire Jewish people. So they, in one sense, they were doing a worse sin than Haman, so to speak. But of course, bloodshed is worse to God than destroying his temple. The great and humble God. Really from God's perspective, nobody dies at first unless he decides. They're just removed from this world and go to his world, right? So there's no death really before God, unless there's a judgment of death. You see what I'm saying? I'm talking about in the spiritual sense. Unless the soul is destroyed because of sin, there's no such thing as a soul dying before God. So therefore, from God's perspective, there's nothing ethically keeping him from taking more lives, but he doesn't. In fact, he puts life before his Sabbath, before his personal honor. You understand? So you understand how humble and like the very antithesis of narcissist God is. He's the very antithesis of narcissist. Even though for him there's no concept of death unless he wills it, he doesn't dare let a person die at the expense of having to keep his Sabbath first. Push aside the Sabbath until you save the life, and then you can keep the Sabbath once the person is safe. That is who God is. Amazing, amazing. God is so amazing and humble. And speaking of humble, those who learn from God also get humble. Look at Ezra. This is his book, right? We still haven't seen him. And not until chapter 7 does Ezra make an appearance in his own book. That is humble. Right? What's the only parable, what's the only prophet that we know is even more humble than that? Moses, right? Because he wrote 50 chapters in Genesis before he got to talking about himself. So 50 is more than 7 than 6 chapters. Ezra didn't mention himself, but Ezra it's he wrote the book of Chronicles and the book of Ezra. So, and the book of Chronicles was before he was born, so he didn't have multiple books talking about him that he would be able to delay it. But he still found a way in the one book that he was going to talk about him to not talk about himself for until the 7th chapter. Again, we really only find that by Moses and an equal level of humility in his literary and literary style. I think that's cool. Okay. All right. So we just read through verse 14.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. So now we're going to read verse 15, 16, and 17 with a hopefully translated by Mark. Okay. And that will conclude chapter 5. And then we can start chapter 6. Hopefully we can finish chapter 6 today as well. And then in chapter 7, that's where Ezra comes onto the scene. So hopefully next time we'll start to read about the great Ezra himself. And it's every time I get to this point in the book, I get excited because somebody who tried to not talk about himself for he successfully managed that for 6 chapters, and then now he's gonna have to talk about himself and praise himself. So remember how Moses prayed for God's permission to write a small aleph in the word Vayikra, to kind of not praise himself as much in the book, So this will be interesting, fascinating to see the way Ezra was thinking to try to be humble, but even though he was commanded, write this down, So it was probably a something of a test for the humble Ezra to have to praise himself in writing for eternity, Okay, but you got to do what God wants you to do, All right, so let's go verses 15, 16, and 17 in the Aramaic. V'amar le il manaya say ezel achis himo v'hichla di Yerushalem uveselaha yisbenei al asreha edain shesh batzar dech asa yahav ushaya di veselaha di Yerushalem umin edayin v'ad kaan misbenei v'la shalim uchan hein al malka tav Isbakar Beves Ginzaya di Malka Sama di Bavel Hain Isai di Min Koresh Malka Sim Taim Lemivne Beisalaha Dech Birushalem Urus Malka Aldana Yishlach Alena. Okay, Mark, please translate the last 3 verses of chapter 5. 15, 16, 17.
Yeah, 15, 16, 17. Okay. And he said to him, take these vessels, go put them in the sanctuary that is in Jerusalem, and let the temple of God be built on its place. Then this Sheshbazzar came and set in place the walls of the temple of God in Jerusalem, for then until now has been under construction, but not has been completed. Now it is, if it pleases the king, let a search be made for the royal archives that are there in Babylon. If it is true that a decree was issued by King Cyrus to build this temple of God in Jerusalem, and let the king convey to us his will in this matter.
Okay, so again, the very getting them to agree to take this to the king is already giving them home court advantage because of the presence of Queen Mother Esther and the Prime Minister Mordecai in Shushan. So things were weighted in favor of the Jews now, whereas earlier in the book it was starting to look grim. They couldn't even build the temple they got permission to build. But now things are in favor, and the turning point is going to be here in chapter 6. Let's first check out. Let's see, was there a commentary I wanted to cover? Okay, so on page 54, Linda,
Yes.
the third line, Sheshbazzar's appointment, and also the next verse. Could you read those?
Sheshbazzar's appointment by the king was stressed so that the construction would be considered as occurring under the king's auspices, Malbine. And he said to him, Cyrus said to Sheshbazzar, Rashi, and to put them, the translation follows Ibn Ezra and Meduzos. Rashi renders, bring them to the sanctuary on its place, on its original site where the first temple had stood. Rashi and Metzudos. Sheshbazzar came. This passage indicates that Sheshbazzar led the Jewish laborers in the laying of the temple foundation. The prophet Zechariah identifies the leader who did this as Zerubbabel. The hands of Zerubbabel laid the foundations of this temple. Zechariah 4:9. It seems then that Sheshbazzar and Zerubbabel were the same person. See commentary to 1:8. Yalkut Shimone, however, identifies Sheshbazzar as the prophet Daniel, of whom it is stated in the scripture that he arose and attended to the king's business, Daniel 8:27. In recognition of Daniel's zeal in performing this work, he was rewarded with the opportunity to establish the temple. God said to him, You have served zealously. In the past, you guarded the gateway reserved for mortals. As it is written, and Daniel was at the king's gate, Daniel 2:49. You may now absorb yourself with the construction of the temple, unquote. Daniel was instructed not to disclose the future events that he had foreseen in his prophetic vision. Although deeply shocked by the catastrophes he had witnessed, he exercised the utmost self-discipline in concealing his inner turmoil and rose to perform the work of the king with the outer appearance of serenity. Ibid 8:26-27. See Art Scroll Daniel. Because of his great zeal and exercising self-restraint, he was elevated from guardianship of mortal kings to the service of God.
Talking about Daniel. Yeah, so
Yes.
let's pause there. So if that's the case, and again, we've spoiler alert, if you didn't see the previous videos on the Book of Ezra, we did. Yes, Daniel is Sheish Batzar according to our understanding. But so then, what do you do with this verse? The hands of Zerubbabel laid the foundations of this temple from Zechariah 4:9. So it seems to me it's extremely easy to explain because remember the foundation was built twice. Once 18 years earlier than this chapter, when the 10 sons of Haman were successful in halting uh, the building of the temple, and once again, what happens if you leave a building site abandoned for 18 years? Weathering, you got to cut all the weeds, etc. Right? So when he had to clean off all of the foundation stones that were laid by Daniel as Sheitzbatzar, Zerubbabel took over as in responsibility as the one who laid the foundation. You understand? So now, even though, for example, King David built the foundation of the first temple, it's called the Temple of Solomon, not the Temple of David. So the one who completes it is the one who gets the credit for it. Right? So there's historical precedent within Tanakh, the Temple of Solomon, not the Temple of David, right? And it's within the context of this book, we could see the 18 years. What does that do to a construction site if you abandon it for 18 years? It has to
Had
be
to start over.
in some ways. I mean, when you talk about big stones, but again, because of this problem, right? They were not using big stones yet. But if they did use big stones, these stones already would have had weeds growing out of the cracks or something by this time. So again, you have to rebuild it, and we see historical precedents by Temple of Solomon. David did the foundation, but it's Temple of Solomon. So too, Daniel did the foundation, but it's the Temple of Zerubbabel. And we see on the in the Mos Tzur song, the hymn on Hanukkah, Kates Bavel Zerubbabel, Kate Shivim no Shati. So Zerubbabel is considered the building of the temple where the story of Hanukkah occurred. So so that parallels perfectly with the Temple of Solomon. But we know David built the foundation. So too, Daniel built the foundation, really, the initial foundation at least. You understand? So I think it's a very important point. If you bring a source, don't just rather than just leaving it as it could be this answer, it could be that answer. Now we've seen it from both sides of these quotations, even the quoting Zechariah 4:9. It seems that it's Sheshbatzar is Daniel, even from that perspective of the very source. The alternative view was quoted as initially by Art Scroll. You see, right? Interesting. Okay, I agree with me. So, oh, I should know.
Oh dear.
If I argue with myself, I'll let you know. Assuming I actually disagree with myself, but if I agree with myself, I may not necessarily tell you that. You'll have to figure that out for yourself.
Rabbi, how many voices do you have going on in your head at this moment?
Wait. Everyone quiet down. Mark just asked a question. Okay, go ahead. Never mind. Okay. No,
Question.
come on. There's more polite ways to say that to your rabbi.
Everyone, don't panic. We got cops all over here on our right and left. They're to protect us. They're here to protect us from any bombshells coming to ruin our studio career. Hang on tight, folks. We'll be millionaires someday in the future. In no time.
Very nice. Okay, so
When
now.
we get 10K subscribers, hopefully, of course.
Oh, thank you. That'll be nice.
Yeah, we need a lot of money.
Yeah, well, Yeah, we're not doing this at this stage of things. At least we're certainly not doing this for money. We're doing it lishma, for altruistic purposes. We are not anywhere near like 10,000 subscribers or anything. But as long as God's holy word is being taught in the popular language of our generation, that we're doing something right.
We'll do this to make a living home for Hashem and bring Mashiach.
Well, actually, when you teach Torah, hopefully correctly, you're creating a spiritual, like a intellectual temple, right? Where people could learn about or study hall, virtual study hall where people are learning about God's word. So, uh, you know, and so there's a discussion about, is the temple going to be built by humans as per the position of Rambam Maimonides, or is the temple already built spiritually already built in physically in a different dimension, and it's going to miraculously appear in our world? So, according to that Medrash, how would you explain the position of Rambam that the temple would be built physically? Well, because you could fulfill the concepts of a temple being constructed in a supernatural way, because people from all over the world can start learning about the Mishnah, the Mishnayos on the temple, right? They can learn the halachos of building a temple in Maimonides online. They could discuss the rebuilding of the temple in the Book of Ezra online, like we're doing. So we are making a supernatural temple. All people engaged in such behaviors, we're participating in the concept of creating a supernatural temple. So whether or not we're actually doing a physical temple, there are several sources in the sages of the Talmud, in the Medrash, that when you learn about building the temple, it's like you're building the temple. So, in other words, even just studying the Book of Ezra, we're already helping to rebuild the temple, God willing. But to also do it online, being heard anywhere in the world that somebody wants to tune in, assuming they even hear about the class. It's also doing the concept of a supernatural temple, because from the perspective of the time of the prophets of Israel, uh, teaching Torah to everywhere in the world at the same time is an incredible miracle that only you would think about what happened in the time of Mount Sinai, right? That you have millions of people learning Torah at the same moment, right? That's awesome, but that's just what we take for granted in our generation. So, I mean, that's another aspect of the value of sharing Torah links online. It's fulfilling supernatural concepts from the perspective of most people in world history, right? So thank God, God allows us to participate in such great things. Uh, you know, uh, However great or small we may feel, or embarrassingly, some of us may be. Nobody look right now. Okay, so but God is generous in giving us mitzvahs, so we can share Torah links and get lots of righteousness. Understand? Son, I was waiting for a comment from you. Yeah. Okay. He's okay. I'll calm down.
Yeah.
Okay, good boy. Good boy. Okay, don't scare the snack. Don't scare the cat, and I can give you a kosher Scooby snack later. Just calm down.
The cat's
Okay.
not. The cat's not something to eat. He's an actual mortal animal being.
Very good. Okay, so Baruch Hashem, we finished chapter 5 of Ezra. Now let's go to chapter 6. Okay, hold on. Baruch Hashem. Okay, so let's see. All right, so the next translator will, I guess, is Linda. Is that correct? Still
I
going through that?
believe so. I believe
Okay.
so, sir.
Okay.
Sure. It could be Linda.
Yeah, I think you were the last translator, correct, Mark? You translated 17, right?
Yes, I do remember translating, I think, up into the end.
Okay.
Yes, I did translate up to the end of chapter 5.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so the Aramaic goes through verse 18. So if even if we don't finish the chapter, there's only 22 verses in this chapter. But even if we, for example, got to verse 18, that would be something, because then we will have completed the Aramaic section, and it would all be easier reading for people learning the original Hebrew. Okay, so let's do what we can. All right, I'm going to try to do a few verses now so we could make progress. Beidayin Daryavesh Malka Sam Taim Vakaru Baves Sifraya Di Ginzaya Mahachasin Tama Bavel Vishtachach Baach Masa Bavirsa Dim Bamadai Madinta Megillah Chada V'chein Kesiv Begavah Dichrona Bishnas Chada lechoresh malka sam taim beis elaha Yerushalem baisa yisbene asar di divchin u shohi mesovlin rumeha amin shitin pesayeha amin shitin din Bachin di Evan Galal Talasa Nidbach di Chadas Venif Kisa Min Beis Malka Tis Yahiv V'af Mane Veis Elaha di Dahava V'chaspa di Nebuchadnezzar Hanpek Min Hechla di Yerushalem Jerusalem, Vehevel Vavel Yahasivun Vihach Lehechla Div Jerusalem La Asreha Saches Beves Elaha. Okay, please translate the first five verses. Linda, chapter 6 of Ezra.
Then King Darius issued a decree, and they searched in the library where the archives were stored in Babylonia. A scroll was discovered in a pouch in the palace in the province of Media, and this was the record that was written in it. In the first year of King Cyrus issued a decree concerning the temple of God in Jerusalem. The temple shall be built, a place for the bringing of offerings, with its walls strongly founded, its height 60 cubits and its width 60 cubits. There shall be 3 rows of marble and 1 row of new wood, with the expenses provided for by the royal palace. Also, the golden and silver vessels of the temple of God, which Nebuchadnezzar removed from the sanctuary in Jerusalem and brought to Babylon, shall be returned and shall go to the sanctuary that is in Jerusalem, to their place, and they shall be placed in the temple of God.
It's so nice to, of course, it is the Holy Scripture, but it's just so nice to people saying the temple of God, and it's actually the temple of God. We're not talking about a place of idolatry. In most religious, sanctuaries on earth are currently places with some kind of idolatry. So it's so beautiful to read any kind of text whatsoever. It talks about the temple of God, and it's talking about the temple of God. it's just I find it extremely refreshing. So yeah. Okay. Um, okay, so there on verse 3, there's different commentaries. Really, it would be better if they would review us, review for us the commentaries we learned about the smaller, the fact that the temple's smaller. So here it says how the temple is the same size as the first temple, which could be confusing. Okay, I'm quoting on verse 3, the citation from Ibn Ezra. Uh, the length of the temple, according to Ibn Ezra, was the same as the first temple, but uh, the width and height are not discussed by Ibn Ezra. Okay, so but just saying the length of the temple is the same as the first temple, if we don't know the previous conversation, so that now it looks like a contradiction, but it's not. It's only talking about one of the three dimensions. You understand? It was, as we learned previously, it was half the width of the first temple. Here, Rabbi Yeshaya Mitrani comments that the width of the second temple building was equal to its great height, 60 cubits, so that its walls would not collapse. So Rabbi Yeshaya Mitrani is, and perhaps he's in a way judging Cyrus favorably. Perhaps he said, "Oh, the design by Solomon was risky. Perhaps that's why it was destroyed. If you have to make it the exact same, you know, box uh, dimensions so that it's stronger and it won't fall down." But I'm not sure that works because it said you have to use wood instead of stone. So if you want to make it stronger, wood is not necessarily stronger than stone, unless you're trying to chop down trees in petrified forests, and then good luck with that. So it's nice to try to judge favorably, but um, you know, again, Cyrus the Great is was was called in the prophet a like a messianic character, a figure in world history. So it's obviously in many ways he was righteous, but again, he was still a practicing, I believe it was Zoroastrian. Not He did not convert to the regular ways of Bnei Noach. So he wasn't completely following the ways of Bnei Noach, just being um, trying to heed the prophecies said about him, not really accepting God as his God. As we said previously, he said the God who is in Jerusalem. He wasn't talking as his God. You understand? So it's a difficult thing, but thank God that we're able to learn this, and we're able, these people were living through it, but we were able, God willing, to go through multiple chapters in the same sitting and get a bigger feel of it. If you go too slow when you're studying this kind of book, when you have varying factors that could be contradicting each other, by the time you get to the last chapters, you could forget the commentary on the first chapters. So, that's why I want us to try to finish as much of chapter 6 as possible, get to the next controversy that goes back to chapter 2. There's a seeming contradiction. So hopefully we could reach that today and resolve that before our recollection of chapter 2 gets a bit older. Okay, so all right, let's continue in the verses, going to verse 6. Okay, so Mark, be prepared. Whatever I read, it will be your turn to translate.
Yes, sir, will.
Thank you, sir.
You're very welcome.
But thank God, I can't turn it off. The idea of we discussed previously, the merit of sharing Torah videos, and for example, if you know someone who would want a shorter video than this class, so look for a shorter video and share that with them. The main thing is to share a video. If you're making yourself, if you're giving yourself a mitzvah, that means you're pleasing God, right? And so it's okay at first to be a bit selfish, trying to increase your personal merit by spreading more and more Torah, spreading more and more links. Because the sages say, even do something from a less altruistic perspective, because from a less altruistic perspective of doing good, you'll eventually do good for more altruistic perspective. So even if you're only sharing Torah links for your personal merit, and even if you're sharing Torah links that I'm not involved in, and it doesn't necessarily directly influence my merit base, nevertheless, I can get residuals because I give you good advice, and you get merit for yourself and for whoever is learning from the Torah links that you share. So just make sure it's kosher Torah links, and you share it, and that's the main thing. And this, I find this, Tanakh is fascinating to me, and I find God's system of reward for those who are engaged in trying to share His holy word that's fascinating as well. We, even if we didn't learn we didn't teach the class, we just shared the link with someone, we get the reward as if we personally taught the class. It's really generous from God, and it's really a wonderful thing to be engaged in, to help produce Torah throughout the world, and even just with the distribution of Torah throughout the world. Okay, so now let's continue. Again, the Torah, one's Torah study should influence someone to increase their tzedakah and mishpat, their ethics and morals in the world, and if we do that, then we're learning something correctly. So even if sometimes you may hear me wax poetically in the middle of a different topic, nevertheless, it's worthwhile, and it's something to consider, because it's the ethics of the Torah affecting me to try to encourage everyone to share in the mitzvah, and you sharing a Torah link of a rabbi who studies better than me can give you a merit greater than I'm able to achieve personally. So that's a pretty good thing. Give it a try if you're not currently doing it already. But of course, I'm judging you all favorably that you are. Thank you. All right, continuing now in the Aramaic. This is verse 6 and onward in chapter 6 of the book of Ezra. Kan tatnai pachas avar nara, shesar boznai uchna vashon afar chaye di avar nara rachikin havo min tama. Shavuku la vidas Beis Elaha Dech Pachas Yehudaye Usavaye Yehudaye Beis Elaha Dech Yivnon Al Asreha Umini Sim Teim Lama Di Saavdun Im Save Yehudaye Ilech Lemivne Beis Elaha Dech Uminichse Malka Di Midas Avar Nahara Asparna Nifkasa Tehave Mis Yahava Guvraya Ilech Di La Levatala. Okay, Mark, could you translate 6, 7, and 8?
Okay, I'm on it now. Okay. So now, Tachin, governor of Trans-Euphrates region, Sheth are
Okay, and as we pointed out previously, that the Trans-Euphrates is not the way I would have translated. I would have been more literal. Across the river or Trans River, which is the way two of the Art Scroll books and Judaica Press and the JPS, and the Koran, they all translate it that way. Okay, please continue, Mark.
So
You could do Trans Euphrates or Trans River. Either one is okay.
Okay. So now, Tata and I, governor of the Trans across the river region, Shether Bozani and their cohorts of the Aphares Apharesites to the Trans-Euphrates trans across river region kept distance from that place, leave the work of the temple of God alone. The governor of the Jews and the elders of the Jews shall rebuild this temple of God in its place. I decree is hereby issued by me that you should cooperate with these elders of the Jews to rebuild the temple of God, and the expenses should be provided immediately to the people from the royal estate, from the Trans across the river regions, taxes, so their work not be halted, and whatever they require.
Yeah, let's pause there. Okay, so remember this initial reaction by, let's see, okay, so if this is okay, so look in the okay, let's see, okay, all right, so again, if this is in the second year of Darius's reign, so then he's too young to be writing these words. It was either written by Ezra or Mordechai or both of them together. So if not, if this is later in when Darius was already 9 years old, so it could be his words. But we see the influence of Esther here, that Esther, Mordechai, and Darius knew that this is the temple of God. There's one God in the world, monotheism. So even though Cyrus was not a monotheist directly, through but Darius the Persian was. Okay, so that's a very important point to make. So now we have a transition. Now the leader of the free world is um, is a monotheist. That's a historic moment, right? What we found with Nebuchadnezzar and Cyrus, they went certain they said certain nice things about God, but personally didn't uh, make the transition all the way to serving God. Cyrus, of course, did better than Nebuchadnezzar uh, as a personal, you know, avoiding evil and doing good. But it's still, there was room for improvement. But Darius the Persian was a completely monotheistically religious man, so that should be noted. And even before he was old enough, his mother and Mordecai were already speaking just like he would also speak, also with the monotheism. So it was a beautiful thing. So, in other words, the passing of Achashverosh it was a relief to the Jewish community. They didn't have somebody who on a whim would suddenly make another insane decree. But it was also a relief that finally you had uh, the world power being led by a pure monotheist like Darius and his mother. Okay, let's continue in the Aramaic in verse 9. Machashchan uvnei sorin v'dichrin v'imrin la'lavan la'laha shemaya chintin malach chamar u'mashach kememar kohanaya divu shalem lehave mis yahev lahom yom biyom di la shalu di lahavon mahak ravain ni chochin la Shemaya umatzalayin lechaye malka vanohi umini sim teem di chol enash di yahashne pisgama dina yisnasach a min baiseha uzakif yim yismeche alohi vaiseha nevalu Yis Aved Aldana Belaha Di Shakin Shemeha Tama Yamagar Kol Melech Ba'am Di Yishlach Yadeha Lahashnaya L'chabala Beis Elaha Dech Di Yerushalem Ana Daryavish Sames Te'em Asparna Yis Avid. Okay, so it's is it Mark's turn or no?
Linda's.
It's Linda's. Okay. Okay,
Yeah,
well, Linda, you're calling yourself Linda still. You didn't change your name to Mark, right?
No, I didn't.
Well, thank you. That just makes the entire class so much easier. Linda deserves a round of applause. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. All right. I got my son's reaction. Okay. I did a good dad joke, Elias Yaakov.
Roar! That was horrible.
Okay. When he says it's horrible, I'm starting to feel good about it, actually.
What? You did the right thing. Now, but we'll blame you anyway.
Okay.
You did the right thing, but we'll blame you anyway.
Very good. Okay, so we well, we just read 9, 10, 11, and 12. Yeah. Okay, that's when we need a translation. 9, 10, 11, and 12. Linda, yeah, thank you. Okay.
And whatever they require, young bulls, rams, and sheep for burnt offerings to the God of heaven, wheat, salt, wine, and oil, according to the specifications of the Kohanim who are in Jerusalem, shall be supplied to them day by day without fail, so that they may offer pleasing offerings to the God of heaven and pray for the lives of the king and his children. And a decree is hereby issued by me that any person who will deviate from this matter shall have a beam torn out of his house, upon which he shall be hanged, and his house shall be designated a dunghill for this. And may the God who has caused his name to dwell there topple any king or people who may stretch out his hand to disobey this decree, to damage this temple of God that is in Jerusalem. I, Darius, have issued a decree. Let it be implemented expeditiously.
This seems to be written by someone who understands the mindset of people who had just been running along according to Haman's ideas. So, in other words, either Esther or Mordecai seems to be the driving force behind this statement. They know that there's a segment of the kingdom champing at the bit to cause violence against the Jewish people, and they're looking for a new excuse after the effort by Haman to hurt the Jews is over. Now there's a new way to cause trouble for the Jews here. So by being overly forceful, I don't think it's necessary for Darius to say this, except that there's another concept is that this is quite a few miles away from the capital, right? So the farther reaches of the kingdom, maybe people are more prone to rebel. So he has to give stronger than necessary warnings to people to not violate this law. But it's my feeling that there's a heavy influence here from either Mordecai and or Esther to make a point. Again, because we're dealing, at best, Darius was 9 years old, so therefore, or this happened when he was a bit younger. So it's written by somebody who's talking like an adult. And it's talking about the God of heaven, which just monotheistic terminologies, the temple of God, etc. Okay, Mark, get ready to do the next translation. Starting from verse 13. Edayin tatnai pachas avar nahara, shasar boznai uchen navashon lakavel di shalach daryavesh malka kenema asparna avadu v'savei Yehudaye banayin umatz lachin binvuas Chagai Neviah Uzachariah bar Ido uvano v'shachlilu min ta'am elaha Yisrael u'mita'em Koresh v'Daryavesh v'Artach Shast melech Paras v'Sheitzi Baisa Dana ad Yom Telasa Lirach Adar di Ki Shnas Sheis L'Malchus Daryavesh Malka. Okay. So can you please translate through verse 14? Yeah, that was actually just two verses, 13 and 14. They're pretty long.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Mhm.
Okay. Tatana, governor of the Trans Across the River region, Shether Bozai, and their cohorts, in consideration of King Darius, dispatched and expeditionally according to what was stated. The elders of Jews built and were successful through the prophecy of Haggai and prophet and Zechariah, son of Edo.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They built and okay, they built and they established foundations of the temple by the decree of the God of Israel and by the decree of Cyrus, Darius, Artaxerxes, king of Persia.
Okay, so now remember, this is another warning about us. Remember the verse we just discussed about from Zechariah about Zerubbabel building the foundation with his hands. So here we see Haggai and Zechariah building the temple, right? But it also says they built it over the course of three different kingdoms, three different administrations. And it says elsewhere, of course, that Zechariah built the foundation. So, in other words, it doesn't come to exclude. It doesn't come to rewrite the other verses. It's saying these two prophets helped Zerubbabel along the way, right? So they went in the time of Zerubbabel. But Daniel apparently may have preceded them. It's not certain because again they did know each other. They didn't meet each other. It could have been at the same time as well. But we know Haggai and Zechariah were there during the time of Zerubbabel. And it says here, Cyrus, Darius, and Artaxerxes. Cyrus is the only king that we have a link that Sheshbatzar as Daniel would have been there. So we see here, yes, indeed, Haggai and Zechariah were in fact there during Sheshbatzar's time, which is Daniel, and they also were there during the time of Zerubbabel. So it doesn't come to contradict Zechariah; it comes to just explain it. Yes, they did. They were there with Zerubbabel, but they were also there with Daniel. Yeah. So Zechariah is not contradicting Zechariah. Okay, just wanted to clarify that. Okay. Okay, so now let's read the final verses of Aramaic in this book. And the okay, so that's I'll be reading verses 15, 16, 17, and 18. Okay, so Linda, be ready to translate. Va'vadu v'nei Israel kohanaya v'levaye u'shar b'nei galusa chanukas beis elaha dina b'chedva v'akrivu lachanukas beis elaha dina torin ma'av dichrin masayin imrin arba ma'a utzfirei izin lachata al kol Yisrael terei asar leminyan Shivte Israel. Vakimu Chohanaya Bifalugas Hon Levaye B'machlekas Hon Al Avidas Elaha Divir Shalem Ki Kasav Safar Moshe. Okay, Linda, please translate verses 15 through 18.
This temple was completed by the third day of the month of Adar during the 6th year of the reign of King Darius. The children of Israel, the Kohanim, and the Levites, and the remainder of the people of the exile celebrated the inauguration of this temple of God with joy. They offered for the inauguration of this temple of God 100 bulls, 200 rams, and 400 sheep, and 12 young goats as sin offerings for all of Israel, corresponding to the number of the tribes of Israel. They established the Kohanim in their groups and the Levites in their divisions for the service of God in Jerusalem, as written in the book of Moshe.
This paragraph is amazing. First of all, yay, they finished the temple. Secondly, as written in the book of Moses, even 1,000 years later, adherence to every word of Moses is still being still the main value in the Tanakh. It's beautiful. Okay, so now, but if you look at the commentary, there is something we have to clarify. Okay, so on verse 17, it says corresponding to the number of the tribes of Israel. If there's only, we mentioned previously Benjamin and right, Judah and Benjamin. So why are we talking about 12 tribes here? Now we said previously we had a long discussion, right? Of and we came to the conclusion all 12 tribes were among the tribes of Judah and Benjamin, but among the tribes of Judah and Benjamin were and half of Levi were all of the leaders of Israel at the time. So that's why they were called after the tribe of Judah and Benjamin, right? But there were members of all tribes, and we learned previously that there was that happened during the time of Hezekiah and Josiah. Hezekiah, there were 10% of the 10 tribes returned. In Josiah, there accumulated 25% of the 10 tribes, and then the 75% of the 10 tribes remained lost, and that is why we still talk about the lost tribes, is because it's the majority that were lost. And Hakolafi Rov Hamas says in Parkei Avos, Ethics of the Fathers, everything's according to the majority of the matter.
Perhaps
So,
either lost or are they not recognized?
no, well, it's a little both. It depends which tribe you're talking about. But lost, it could be lost from the people. If they lost recognition, it's the same thing as if they were lost. They would still need a conversion to verify that they're a member of the people. But as far as are there members of the 12 tribes in Israel that are Jews from birth? Yes, there are, and we
Okay,
already discussed.
so if they're lost and not recognized and need some kind of thingy to recognize them, then why is it made so hard by the rabbis to do so?
No, well, you can't. I mean, there's a system of how to join the Jewish people. So now, if somebody comes, say they are a different tribe with a different background. Now, again, with the 10 tribes, it's different from anyone trying to convert to Judaism. They have to just establish simply that they're not somebody with a different religion, and they want to bring their other religion into Judaism. But it's more complicated with the 10 tribes, because by the 10 tribes, there's a special prophecy that their culture would be lost. So in other words, lost is not only that they are missing, lost is also by divine decree, they had to give up their culture and join with the rest of the Jews in Judah and Benjamin and the half tribe of Levi. So this is another aspect of the concept of lost tribes, that the ways of their forefathers, the 200 years of idolatry in the northern kingdoms of Ephraim and northern kingdom of Israel, that was unacceptable, and it has to be left behind. And they have to be faithful to the ways of the temple in Jerusalem. And the tribes that were upholding that was Judah, Benjamin, and the half tribe of Levi. Most of the Kohanim were in Jerusalem at the time. Okay, but as far as the 10 tribes have a more complicated reason why they have to convert. It's just somebody converting from different religion. It's straightforward. Either they join the community or they don't, right? But somebody converting from 10 tribes, they have to make sure they're converting, even if they had a paper attesting that they are, let's say Elijah came and said that person is Jewish, right? Still, they have to do a kind of like a suffix here. Just they go before the Beth Din and say that they accept the Torah that was preserved by Judah, Benjamin, and the half tribe of Levi. You understand? They're not trying to create a new oral Torah. Okay. So does that answer your question, Nathaniel?
Sure.
Okay. Okay, so there's a complication. Now remember in Pirkei Avos it says Hevu Masuni Bedin, you should be deliberate in judgment. Now, at first, if you're just reading in the English, it could look like an art scroll arguing in an art scroll situation, but it's not. It's actually it appears at first glance perhaps as Matsudas David arguing Matsudas David, but it's not an argument, and we'll explain this. Okay, so let's we find this in the blue edition of Ezra, page 61. The on the right column, the bottom paragraph 12. Can you read from there, Linda? 12 corresponding?
12 corresponding to the number of the tribes of Israel. Meduzos observes that 12 offerings were brought, even though only 2 of the tribes, Judah and Benjamin, had now returned to the Holy Land.
Okay, pause there. Yeah, pause there. Okay, now let's look back and chapter 2, verse 70 in the art scroll. Okay, page 27, first paragraph, 27. And some of the people.
27.
Just the first paragraph. Yeah.
I got to get there. 27. I don't see it.
And
Sorry.
some of the people, page 27 in the blue edition, and some of the people in their cities, and all of this of Israel in their cities. Matsuda states that some of the people refers to the members of the tribes of Judah and Benjamin, all of Israel to the returnees from the other tribes. That's chapter 2, verse 70. Okay, so Arts 1, chapter 2, verse 70 says, Malbim says, Matsudos says that all of Israel refers to the returnees from the other tribes. Matsudos agrees there are 12 tribes. And here Art Scroll is quoting Matsudos that even though only 2 of the tribes had now returned to the Holy Land, Judah and Benjamin.
Is Art Scroll arguing with itself again?
No, that's what I'm trying to say. Have a Masunabedin, the Pirkei Avos, the sages warn us, be deliberate in judgment. Don't assume something until you know all the facts of the case. This is actually the exact way Matsudos is written in the Hebrew. So I already verified that for you. Okay. And so now, if you look in page 26 in the Hebrew, it shows Matsudas David in the verse Ayin, which is 70, and the Divrei Maskil Chol Yisrael, the bold-faced text of the Chol Yisrael, came ha'olim miyeser hashvatim. They are the ones who came up from the remaining tribes. So that's a precise translation of the Matsudas David. And then here in chapter 6, verse 17. So here it's saying the 2 tribes, right? This quotation of Matsudos sounds like it's talking about just we're reopening the argument from the perspective of Matsudos, not the perspective of Art Scroll. Okay, now let's read the next paragraph in page 6, chapter 6, verse 17. Tosafos to Arachin. Can you read that,
32a, however, states that some members of all of the 12 tribes took part in the return to the land of Israel. See commentary to 264 and verse 22.
Now, if you go to our video on chapter 2 of Ezra, you'll see there's many more sources as well. I don't think we even got to that Tosfos, but Tosfos agrees with our position that of course there were all 12 tribes among the Jews. So this is yet another source to add to our interpretation. So now, but why is Mitsudos seeming to argue with itself? Okay, so let's look at what he's saying. Again, we established previously that when we mentioned Judah and Benjamin, it's talking about the leaders. This is chapter 1, verse 5. So the heads of the families of Judah and Benjamin, and the Kohanim and the Levites, and all those whose spirit of God had aroused, got up to ascend and build the temple of Hashem, which is in Jerusalem. So Judah and Benjamin were the main leaders besides the Levitic priests, but it was also in the territories of Judah and Benjamin, right? So now, again, in the Second Temple era, they were not allowed to freely move there. They weren't allowed to build the temple freely. So it makes sense that they were not able to accumulate wealth as easily as they did before the exile from Babylon. Which means that now in that era, if you don't have a lot of money, that means you had to walk to the temple. So that means who could walk to the temple on a daily basis? Only people who lived in Judea, in Judah and Benjamin. The other tribes as a territory cannot be mentioned because otherwise they're going to be coming once a week or something. They cannot come on a daily basis and get back home in time if they're on foot. You understand? Otherwise, walking 10 miles, praying really quick, and then leaving and walk 10 miles back, it's kind of stretching the limits of how many people, are able to do that. Only people who can do marathons, not the kids, not the elderly. Unless for example, that everybody was completely rich, and everybody had a wagon, and the elderly could easily, come there in wagons, etc. So territorially speaking, in the Second Temple, it was all about Judah and Benjamin as territories. And again, the territories were called by the names of the tribes back then. So saying Judah and Benjamin, what's the context? In chapter 1, verse 5 of Ezra, Judah and Benjamin is literally talking Judah and Benjamin. From those tribes, these leaders came. But it also mentions Levi, right? Because the leaders are also from Levi, including the Ezra and his nephew Jeshua, the priest, right? Okay, so when it says here, Judah and Benjamin now return to the Holy Land, in other words, what Susan is saying, as complete tribes. Because he doesn't contradict what he said in chapter 2, verse 70. You understand? So therefore, it's not a contradiction. And what's an indication? The fact that here we see explicitly the verse mentions the tribe of Levi in chapter 1, right? So if anybody were to say only Judah and only Benjamin returned, it's already been contradicted by the verse in right? Chapter 1, verse 5 already contradicts that. We know Levi was there, right? We know from the author of the book Levi was there.
We couldn't do
You see what I'm saying?
people without the Levites, without the Levites.
Well, but you see, if you're saying, I'm trying to explain the interpretation of Matsudos, you cannot use the interpretation of Matsudos in chapter 6 to try to take the other side that only Judah and Benjamin returned. You can't do that because it's impossible. It refers to only Judah and Benjamin because the verse itself says that Levi was there too. We know for sure Levi was there, right? So to try to reinterpret Matsudos as saying only Judah and Benjamin were there, it's a flat out misinterpretation, right? So therefore, there's not enough here in Mitsudos' opinion in chapter 6 to overturn what he already said in chapter 2, verse 70, that people from the other tribes were there. Okay, and then ArtScroll brings in parentheses the quote of Tosfos and Orachin. For those of you looking that up, Orachin chapter page 32a. That's the first Tosfos, the first paragraph of Tosfos, begins on the previous page. It's about 75% down in the first Tosfos. Okay, so, but you see my point. Everyone get that? It's for someone who would want to use. I'm trying to help you to learn how to interpret an interpretation. It's impossible to interpret this Mitsudos as a source to say only Judah and Benjamin were there, because it does not overturn his previous comment. Because if you try to use it as a source to say maybe he's disagreeing with himself on chapter 2, but then the verse chapter 1 verse 5 would also disagree with him, right? So then now Ezra would be disagreeing with Mitsudos. So Mitsudos would never hold that position. So Mitsudos didn't explain himself, because why would he have to? Everybody knows Levi was there, so therefore just saying these are the only two tribes. In other words, obviously the only two tribes that returned in completion and fully returned. Only two tribes that every member of the tribe returned, or only two tribes, the only two tribes that had a majority of the leaders. The Levitic leaders, other than Ezra himself, were all only in the temple. Otherwise, it was only Judah and Benjamin as the leaders of the generation. Okay, is that point clear to everyone? It makes sense to everyone?
Yes.
Okay. Any questions? Okay, but you see, this is a very important. This is a very important principle of exegesis, right? So, a commentary. Why would he contradict himself? And if he's contradicting himself, he would not do it against the verse. And the verse just mentioned the tribe of Levi. So if you try to interpret Matsudas on 617 as a contradiction to Matsudas on 270, that would be a contradiction of the verse itself. Therefore, we can't even go there. There's no way to do that as a commentary. Understand? So this is important, because what if one day one of you, or each of you, or many of you, want to become commentators on write your own commentary on Tanakh? So this is an important principle to understand. So what I would do if I was translating this Mitsudos on verse 6, I would mention something about qualifying what he means, right? At least ArtScroll contradicts the implication that he means it literally. But you don't have to even quote from Tosfos and Orachin to understand. Mitsudas can never mean what it seems like he means here, out of context. You understand? So I would first explain the context of the Mitsudas commentary before even bringing the Tosfos. But they bring in the Tosfos, so that's very nice. We now have yet another source that shows that there were 12 tribes there. You understand? Okay, so to read you the language of Tosfos, and again, it's in Aramaic, so it's good to learn. Mihu mikol shevet v'shevet chazru miktsasan. But from each tribe and each tribe returned some of them. Okay, so if you're looking in the Aramaic, it would be over here in the Gemara and Arachim, right down here. Yeah. All right. So this is very cool. So in other words, this is not a contradiction, but it could be easier understanding this, just adding like one phrase in parentheses when you're quoting Matsudas here, because otherwise you're creating a contradiction to your commentary on chapter 2, verse 70. Okay. All right. So Baruch Hashem, we finished all the Aramaic, but we could just do 3, 4 more verses and we'll finish the entire chapter. So why don't we do that? Okay.
Okay.
All right. So Mark, are you the next translator? Okay, so I'm going to read 19 through 22. Be ready to translate, please. And notice it's now in Hebrew. It's going to sound more familiar, perhaps. V'yasu v'nei hagola es hapasach barba asor lachodesh harishon ki hitaru hakonim ha'levim ke'achad kulam tahorim v'yishchatu hapesach l'chol b'nei hagola v'lachehem hakonim v'lahem v'yochlu v'nei Yisrael hashavim mehagola v'chol hanivdal mitum'as goyei haaretz alehem lidrosh ladonai Elohei Yisrael v'yasu chag matzos shivas yamim b'simcha ki simcham Adonai V'hei save leiv melech Ashur alehem l'chazek yidehem b'melechas beis Elohim Elohei Yisrael. Okay, Mark, please read the last 4 verses of chapter 6 of Ezra, 19 through 22. If you could unmute your mic, it might be, yeah. Okay, well, but there's also there's some sort of a internet connection problem with we didn't hear your last words even without muted mic. Can you try to speak again?
I'll make sure my mic was on. I was trying to get it turned on.
Okay. All right. So there is a problem with your mic, with your internet connection. It's hard to hear what you're saying. Can you count to 5? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like that?
1, 2, 3.
Are you still talking?
Hang on. Okay. Hang on. Hold up. Okay. 1,
yeah.
3, 4, 5,
No.
6.
It's not consistent. Okay, I'm sorry, Mark. Would you mind if we let somebody else translate? You're having a connection problem.
That's fine. That's fine.
Okay. All right, but we still like you.
It's okay.
Okay. Okay, can we have a volunteer translator to the last 4 verses of chapter 6?
You want me to do that, Rabbi? Just finish up the chapter?
Okay. Thank you, Linda.
The people of the exile brought the Pesach offering on the 14th day of the first month. For the Kohanim and the Levites had purified themselves as one. All of them were pure. They slaughtered the Pesach offering for all the people of the exile, and for their brethren, the Kohanim, and for themselves. The children of Israel who had returned from the exile ate it, together with all those who had separated themselves from the defilement of the nations of the land, to join them and to seek Hashem, God of Israel. They celebrated the festival of Matzot joyfully for a 7-day period, for Hashem had brought them joy. For he turned the heart of the king of Assyria toward them, to strengthen their hands in the labor for the temple of God, the God of Israel.
Beautiful. And this is hopefully a kind of scene we're going to have soon in our days, God willing. The after many years of exile, finally being able to serve God again according to the commandments in the Torah. How beautiful that is. Thank God. Thank God. Thank God they were able to have that joy, and may we also be blessed in our generation. Same kind of joy. Okay. So on verse 22, then again they revisit the discussion about 10 tribes, and so in the we have a Rishon, one of the classic scholars, who takes the opinion that the 10 tribes did not return to the land of Israel. That's the Ramban and Nachmanides. But if you look in the last paragraph on page 63, can you read that, Linda, in the commentary?
Rambam maintains that the 10 tribes did not return to the land of Israel. The Jewish settlers in Jerusalem consisted only of members of the tribes of Judah and Benjamin and a few representatives of other tribes who had been banished with them to Babylonia.
Okay, pause there.
According,
Pause there. Yeah. Okay, so in other words, even according to the view that says no, not it was only Judah and Benjamin. Even according to that view, there were at least representatives of the other tribes. You understand? So we saw other verses in this book talking about Kol Yisrael, all Israel, right? So therefore, instead of ignoring the majority opinion of the commentaries to try to follow more faithfully the opinion of Ramban here, understand that even according to Ramban's view, there was at least families here and there of the 10 tribes. So it's still the 12 tribes of Israel. Either way you want to look at it, right? You understand? So therefore, we have to go with the Peshat interpretation that it is all 12 tribes of Israel are with Israel today, and they've been with us through the exile, and they too suffered through the Holocaust as well. So it's not like the 10 tribes are totally isolated from the suffering of the Jewish people. They too shared in it. It's just that they also had, in addition to suffering with Judah and Benjamin, they also had their own lost tribes difficulty to go through. You understand? So now,
I like that. I like the part of the sentence that said, together with all those who had separated themselves from the defilement of the nations of the land to join them and to seek Hashem. Is that not Ger?
yeah, I mean, it refers to everyone, including
So
whether
it was both Jews
assimilated,
and
whether it's an
non-Jews.
assimilated Jew or Ger Toshav.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Now Ger Toshav was allowed in because they were having a temple in the as far as not just allowed. Once somebody moves there to join with Israel, they must become a Ger Toshav. So you want to be a regular Ben Noach when there's a temple in the Holy Land, you would have to move out of the Holy Land. You understand? So
No, so it was, but they had not converted yet. It just meant that they had
right,
separated
right.
themselves.
But again, for a Ger Toshav Ben Noach, there's more commandments than for a regular Ben Noach.
Yes, sir, you're right. Yes, sir, I know you're
From the
right.
historic perspective of what a Ben Noach is. After Mashiach comes, probably how many are going to not be a Ger Toshav? But certainly now, um, there's in history until now, a Ger Toshav in Israel is they're compelled by law. One law you should have, like Ger Mizrach. It's several Torah verses like that.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Friedlander, for saying that. I really appreciate that you understand those two different Gedarim, those two different categories. Very few people understand that, so thank you for your wisdom.
I'm just quoting Tanakh. It's God's
Oh
wisdom.
man. Oh man. I wish more people would, unfortunately, but yes.
Thank God. So yeah, I was learning with Russell. We were going over a source about adding more mitzvahs increases the reward in the world to come for Gentiles. So even if they don't convert
Oh.
to Judaism, once they are ger toshav, for sure they can have heaven. Somebody who tries to limit themselves to only 7 commandments, just so they don't get struck by lightning, it's possible to do that and still not go to heaven, so to speak, if you do it in the wrong way. It's there. A person can, God forbid, remove themselves from godliness enough, follow the 7 commandments, and not have heaven for themselves.
That makes complete sense. Is that bittul? Is that the Hebrew word bittul? Like they don't have bittul or some such?
Well, the thing that they're nullifying is any expansion of the mitzvahs. They're only using the mitzvahs to not get struck by lightning. They just
Uh,
want God to bless the work of their hands in this world. So I mean, they're basically
oh,
dedicating themselves to having, in other words, for them, uh,
for
uh,
sake of this world versus for the sake of heaven.
right. So if someone turns, now this is the power God gave to Gentiles. They have complete freedom to do any mitzvah they want, or even to limit the mitzvahs they want. So, for example, a Jew, if he's fighting a missionary defending God's honor right before the Sabbath, he may have to stop right then to keep the Sabbath. But
Hmm.
the regular Ben Noach, not necessarily talking Ger Toshav, regular Ben Noach is empowered to continuing arguing even Shabbos, even online. They could continue to defend the God's honor. Uh,
I
uh,
think you're describing world peace right now.
but a ger toshav ben Noach, they have to respect Shabbos, and they have to also get offline for Shabbos. According to, depends. Again, the ger toshav has more than one connotation.
Hmm.
We'll find out from the Sanhedrin, etc., and Elionavi, etc.,
Well, I
etc.
mean, I'm very curious. Let me know what you guys come up with.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. I'll be quiet now. Thank you
No
so
problem.
much for your wisdom.
Oh, sure. Thanks for your comment. It's very important. But so it's possible for unlike Jews, either you serve God or you don't. If you're going to be a priest, you're representing God or you're not. If you're not, you're not serving God right. Okay, that's not the correct Judaism. But by Noach, they could turn the 7 mitzvahs into a non-religion, and still God won't punish them in this world. But if they take it on as a religion, so then we're talking about the next world. So then if you want the next world, so then why not add a few more mitzvahs? And in fact, there's a Mamre Chazal saying of the sages that Mashiach will come to add more commandments to the mitzvahs of the Bnei Noach when he comes. God willing, soon
Oh
in our
man.
days.
Oh
So
man.
in other words, if Mashiach's coming to add more mitzvahs, it's implying that God wants even Gentiles to do more mitzvahs.
Hmm.
But the God gave an incredible power to Gentiles. They could choose whatever they want, because this is the humble God who's put up with 5,000 years of idolatry. Anybody who wants to serve him, even for the as a political following, to avoid cataclysm, so they could do more sin, is better than what God had to put up with for most people in history.
Yeah.
You understand?
I
So
know,
from
but
God's
the more
perspective,
you do, the higher your tikkun.
yeah, but I mean, God's humility is unbelievable. So, but this explains why there's so many arguments about what is the way of the Ben Noach, is because God is letting people choose. Unless they're a Jew, then they have obligations. So now, if somebody's born a Jew, they got to realize God is trusting them to with a great obligation there. It's a big responsibility, and they have to take it seriously. And I knew a Jew who said he's going to keep all the laws of the Bnei Noach, but that's not what God gave him. God gave him the obligation. You know, that's like going to college and say, okay, I'm just going to take math this semester. So you may not graduate with that. You might be pretty good at math, there's other topics as well, so. But it's so amazing, God's
But if they
humility.
even studied the 7, they would know the 10 were included. So, you can't get away with just 7. You just can't.
Well, again, to not be struck by lightning, to avoid cataclysm in this world, before the humble God, you can, unless you're talking about the next world, unless you want heaven. Now it's
Well,
complicated. Now maybe you want to do
no,
some
I'm
things
sorry. I'm sorry. I'm not limited to just this one.
That's beautiful.
That's, you got to have a goal here.
Right, but I mean, what kind of humble God is this, that he allows people to serve him in any way they want, just serve him, so he has an excuse not to bring cataclysm. Wow,
We
that's
have a very merciful God, yes.
very merciful. That's a very important thing to keep spreading the news. God is merciful. People are not automatically damned before they're born. That's not the way of God. That's not what Tanakh is teaching. Any questions before we call it a session?
Can you hear now?
A little in and out, Mark, but you could try it.
All right. I was going to thank you. I enjoyed the class tonight very much.
Oh, thank you. And you helped others to enjoy the class as well. Thank you for reading. You too, Linda.
You're welcome.
And
For the sake of heaven, we do everything.
And thanks, James and Natanya, for your nice comments. Good
Oh,
questions.
thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank God. Okay, so please share a link, get great merit. And again, it doesn't have to be my links. You could find, I personally, like, I look, for example, like Rabbi Moshe Meir Weiss. He teaches so many topics. I try to share some of his links around, and if somebody learns because of the link I gave him, it's as if I taught some of the topics. He's teaching Gemara, he's teaching Mishnah, lots of stuff. So it's pretty good. So I just figured I'd share the little the I wouldn't call it a cheat code, the the secret code to getting more merit, even if you're not yet at that level personally, because of the merciful God. Anyone who contributes in any way, even as a host to a mitzvah, gets residual reward for that mitzvah, and that's amazing.
Could I ask a question?
Oh, yes, you may. Welcome.
It is, what is the commentary that you're using, the Ezra? What book is that?
That we're using for the curriculum is the Blue Edition of Art Scroll.
Blue edition of Art Scroll.
Yeah,
Okay.
but I've been quoting from other books in English as well, including the Tanakh series Art Scroll, and the Judaica Press, and the Art Scroll Rabbi Schwab book on Ezra and Nehemiah.
Oh, okay. And you can get all those on Amazon?
Probably. Yeah, or now the Art Scroll books are also available on artscroll.com, Masora Publications.
Right.
And Judaica Press. And when I was first studying in English and I wanted an English commentary, I started with Judaica Press. So it's very nice. Judaica Press, among all these, they're the only one who translate every single word of Rashi. So if that's important to you, that's a nice thing. And Judaica Press was the first of these English translations to also use a Hebrew commentary printed on the same book. So as a student trying to learn Hebrew and but still needing to rely on the English, the Judaica Press is really nice. And this is Blue Edition of Art Scroll is the closest thing to the Judaica Press style. But it's good. Generally speaking, you in the Blue Edition, for example, the 5 Megillos, you have 5 books in one volume. So it could be more economical for people to collect the Blue Edition. But the Judaica Press is really amazing. In fact, Chabad.org uses the Judaica Press translation in their free Tanakh online. So I highly recommend it as well.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for your question.
Enjoyed the class tonight.
Very good. Okay. And remember, we have a archive on YouTube. You could do a web search for Tanakh Study Friedlander, and you could find it. And
Okay.
thanks again to the Kirks, Russell and Teresa. They've been hosting us very nicely and really enabling this to occur in this way. So
Thank God, if it wasn't for them, we would not all probably be together. So I hope they know that
yeah, I mean,
appreciate them so much.
yeah, thank God. Back in the day, I was teaching on Skype, but it wasn't recorded.
Mm-hmm.
So
Back in the day.
back in the day, right. So for example, my teachings on the early prophets are not yet recorded on the YouTube. So maybe we'll do a review of that and get back to that, and so we can have the recorded version as well.
That'd be so cool.
Yeah, but first, there's lots of writings to get to.
Yes, 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 yes,
I
yes.
have a computer that needs to be fixed, and if I can get it fixed, they might be on there because that was from a long time ago and I transferred everything.
Yeah, Natanya's been learning with me for over a decade.
Wow.
Very good.
Wow, very good. Thank
Crazy.
God.
I'm not sure when we started, Rabbi, but everything we did was recorded, wasn't it?
Oh, just about. I mean,
So
yeah, I mean,
that was what 6-7 years ago.
well, we could go back. The first thing I think we studied together was maybe Perky Ellis, and then we immediately went to Tanakh, starting with Isaiah, was it?
So all of those should be on the
YouTube.
Yeah.
the YouTube, right?
Right.
So there should be way more than 150.
Right. I think we're almost we're closing in on 200. I think probably
Really?
over. Yeah.
That's interesting. It seems like it would be more if we started with Parkievos, because we went on into Isaiah and Jeremiah and
Mhm.
Ezekiel, and so it's been
Yeah.
quite.
Well, right. I mean, we didn't do 66 chapters on Isaiah. We did a few chapters per time. And,
Okay, I was thinking we did the whole thing.
We did do the whole thing.
yeah, we did the whole thing, but we didn't do one chapter at a time. We sometimes did like 3
Oh, I
chapters.
get it. Yeah. I'm just counting by the weeks, weeks in the year, 50. We're looking at 50 weeks in a year, and
Right.
we've been doing it for let's say 6 years.
I don't think we've
That should be
been doing it that
300.
long.
We've been living here 4 years.
Been here 4 years. Mhm.
Yeah, for example, like the book of Jonah, it would be 1 or 2 classes at the most, right? Just 4 chapters.
Mm. Well, it's a lot, and we appreciate it, Rabbi, that we have this archive and that you
Yeah,
take time to teach us.
okay, yeah. So
Yeah.
Thank you.
God is very merciful. So yeah, that's why I want to make that shorter class we did first on the Parsha and on and Exodus, because the maybe sometimes some people are not watching this class not because of quality but because of it's just kind of long. I mean, again, I was raised in the class with Rav Soloveitchik, and it was very often he would teach for 3 hours in a row
Yeah.
following his stroke. You understand?
Mhm.
So I maybe a part of it is competitive. He suffered more than me, and I don't have the energy to match him yet, but
Well, we
trying to
did
work
four
out.
and a half hours this morning, Rabbi. So
Mhm.
Pretty good, pretty good.
That
Yeah.
was.
Very good. Excellent. Okay, so thank you for your service.
Thank you. Be well, Rabbi.